Hi everyone, this is part 2 of our new chapter that we're reading, The Four Winds, and where we just left off, Frenchie found something, and he's like, "What's this?" And it's something in the drawer. So we're about to find out what it is. Part 2 of chapter The Four Winds. Mig came forward, bending on a knee. Keys! He read the numbered plates, then looked up to the stairs curving up to a second floor from either side of the great room. Room keys. We shuffled up the stairs, kicking balls of dust and busted plaster as we went. As was custom, Meg and Chi-Boy took up the vulnerable front and back positions. Everyone but Minerva held a candle. I stood as tall as I could behind Meg, peering over his shoulder, ahead and down over the railing, into the great room, lit on the far side by the remaining candles. I tried to open my eyes as far as I could to be as useful as possible. I was focused, but not so much so that I couldn't feel Rose reaching for my elbow when we got to the top. Wob carried the keys in the cradle she'd made out of the front of her sweater, and they slid against each other like low metallic groans. We turned towards the dark in front and illuminated a flickering tunnel of doors. Each one was labeled with a small plaque inscribed with a number. Wob walked the line and handed a key to each person. Meg nodded, and Chi-Boy went to the first door, on the right side of the hall, with the matched key. He put it into the lock, filled his lungs with air so his shoulders rose halfway to his ears, and pushed. The suck of air was audible and popped low in my eardrum, like a lid being lifted. And when Chi-Boy disappeared into the room, I panicked a bit and crossed the hall to take up the space he'd left in the doorway. Chi-Boy walked the perimeter of the room before setting the candle down on a small round table in front of another empty fireplace on a much smaller scale than those in the great room. He moved to the bed set against the wall and slowly folded his length on top of the comforter. It was big enough to 6 pillows side by side and stacked 3 deep. He adjusted the pillows under his head and nuzzled into the skin of the made bed like a child. It made me smile seeing Chi-Boy, the fierce scout, bending his arms under his head, wiggling his butt to get into the softness with a goofy grin on his face. I ran back out to the hallway and down to the door with my number on it. The lock was stiff, and I turned it twice before it gave, and the door swung in. Riri was behind me, holding her candle at my elbow. I could feel the pinch of its heat. She gasped into the space, a whole empty, contained space, and followed me in. I threw open the curtains, covering the windows on the far wall, and illuminated the carpet on the floor. It was a mass of vines and blooms that twisted sinisterly in the flame, but sat docile and domestic in the moonlight. "This place is huge," said Riri. "I know." "Who needs this much space?" she asked. "Not sure." I pulled off my torn boots with the toe of the other stepping on the heel. It felt wrong to tromp around in outside shoes. "You didn't check for snakes first, Frenchie." She was upset. "Sorry, Ree." I took the candle from her and walked the perimeter of the room, holding it under the small table and dropping to my knees to check under the bed. The corners were choked with dust, and it smelled like a whole metropolis of mice had lived and bred there, probably until the cats got wise and moved in before moving on. But no snakes. All clear. No snakes. Just some regular old monsters under the bed. That's it. "Really?" Rose answered from just inside the door. "I knew we should have stopped to grab holy water for the buggers on the way in here." I smiled. I couldn't help the size of it either. She made me look stupid when she was around. "Come on, Rose. Let's go into your room next." Ree grabbed her by her forearm and spun her out of the room, making Rose's long dark hair fan out and settle across her shoulders like a shawl. We each checked into a room, made ourselves comfortable, then trudged back down the stairs to grab our gear and bring up the other candles. There was no use risking theft or discovery because of a few pinpoints of light reflected in an abandoned window. It was strange, all of us separated by walls, divided into compartments like bees in a dusty hive, so we kept our doors open. I could hear Riri laughing and the rhythmic thump of bed springs as someone jumped. She and Slapper ran up and down the hall a few times before Slapper, wheezing and holding his rounded side, huffed, "All right, enough. Geez, let's lay down a bit." Mig paced the hall every hour, always on patrol, and Wob spent a long time in Minerva's room, getting her washed up and ready for bed. Minerva was beside herself with joy. She would have spent the longest in a real bedroom before the hunt began, way more than any of us. I heard her speak in full, lovely sentences from my room across the hall. "Where's my nightie?" she asked. "You don't have a nightie, Minerva, but look, you can change into your summer dress to sleep in tonight. I need to boil some tea there. We should have some tea. We can't have a fire tonight, Min. How about let's split one of these waters before bed? Make sure you close the curtains again, you. If you sleep in that moonlight, you'll wake up blind." "Okay, there. They're all shut." No, don't put those candles yet. Don't put out those candles yet. Bring the girls in. I want to tell you about the Rougarou tonight." I caught my breath. An old-timey story. I heard Wob come to the hallway and whistle a two-note tune. Then Ree and Rose shuffled in. I stayed in my room until they were settled, then crept into the hall and settled by the open door. The rise and fall of Slapper's soft snore spilled into the space. Tree and Xingwang had filed into a single room, and their door was closed, locking them in together. And there was no flickering coming from either Mig's or Chi-Boy's room, which meant they were either asleep or on patrol, so I was safe from discovery. This is my grandmare's story, told to me when me and my sisters were turning into women. It's about Rougarou, the dog that haunts the half-breeds, but keeps the girls from going on the road at night, where the men travel. Down by the river to draw water, I feel eyes on the back of my neck, smell the blood of his tongue, even with sweetgrass tight under my arm. I stand and turn fast, already drawing spit against the back of my teeth, hissing like a badger. But no, the Rougarou just watches. Didn't even blink him. Yes, Rougarou. I know one when I see it. Too big to be a dog. Black as pitch. Eyes yellow as new ragweed. I try to ignore him, turn my back even, but still I hear him breathing. Not panting like a real dog, just slow ins and outs like a calm everyday man. So I turn again, this time raising my arms to make me bigger. My sweet grass fall all around my feet. I remember. I can smell it real strong, even over his stench. I growl, a throat sound with no gut in it. He looks up at my hands, and then stands up all smooth like smoke in the coldest sky. All air, no wind. Yes, now I am intimidated, but no fear. There is no time for that nonsense. He is bigger than old Pitot Magnon, and that man was a giant among Christians. What happens next is my old trapline instincts. I still hold that heavy dipper for the water. It is still in my hand, and I bring it across the space between us. Now I see him. He's moved to the right here, in front of me. That old dipper, my mother carved that from the birch we stripped out back and gave it to me when Pierre died. She said it was heavy enough to chase off hungry men, but a widow in this settlement has no need, up till now. It has only been used for water, till now, when it became the Rougarou beating stick. That dipper lands straight on that tender of the beast's nose. Oh, mon Dieu! The noise, that terrible crack like a buffalo gun. Then nothing. I see the thing looking straight at me, and then a gash opens up all slow and oozing on the top of its snout. And as the good Lord is my witness, when that first drop of blood lands on its thick chest, he changes. More terrible cracks and tears. Or tears. I watch bones moving under his skin. The fur comes off in clumps, and all the while his insides are moving his outsides like fish spawning in the shallows. Oh, it is sickening. Reminds me of lying in childbed. At the end of it, his limbs are too long, but human. And there he stands. A man. And he has that hunger there. I see it same way I see it in the men sometimes. Okay, Minerva, it's getting late. Wob, sensing a dark turn in the tale, tried to cut her off. I need to get Riri into bed now. Aw, Wob, I want to hear the story about the dog some more. Riri sounded tired, even through her protest. I heard feet hit the ground as she was made to stand from the bed and marched out the door. That's where we're going to stop with the Four Winds today. You can see Tobias. Say hi, Tobias. Tobias decided to join us for story time today. But we're going to stop in the Four Winds for the Marrow Thieves. Remember to answer your exit ticket questions. The first one is about the Plague of Madness that we read in class. And the second one is about what we just read. What did you notice about the group as they explored the Four Winds? And I'd love to hear if you also have opinions about Rougarou. I think what she was sharing, Minerva was sharing, is a myth or a legend, a story, a fairy tale. It reminds me of the Beauty and the Beast, about how the Beast turned into a man. So I'm not sure what Minerva's trying to get at. Maybe we'll hear the rest of the story and get more clues. But if you want to also write about that, I'd love to hear it. So first question is about Plague of Madness, and the second one, what we just read. What did you notice about the group as they explored the Four Winds? Were they excited? Were they surprised? They all had different reactions. So I'm curious what you noticed. All right. I will see you on our next synchronous day. Say bye, Tobias. See you guys later. Bye.